Biden, Megan is like fascism and the dumbest bill in America. This is Mark Fisher with Mark and the Millennials and the Millennial. Joining me today is, of course, Christopher Hopkins, our producer on the other side of the camera. Welcome, everyone, to this episode of Mark and the Millennials. This podcast is called Biden, MAGA is like fascism. You want to know why? Because that's what Biden actually said. He literally said that. But before we go to that particular part of the podcast, I want to talk to you about real fascism in Washington, D.C. Real fascism in Washington, D.C. The D.C. mayor, ladies and gentlemen, of Washington, D.C., says that there will be no virtual learning this year, and you have to be vaccinated in order to go to public school in Washington, D.C. Again, the D.C. mayor says you have no options of learning remotely in Washington, D.C. You have only one option. It must be in the classroom, but you can't come into the classroom unless you're vaccinated. So this is in the Daily Signal. This just broke. The District of Columbia does not appear to have a contingency plan for unvaccinated students who are banned from attending schools in person this fall after the first 20 days, according to comments made by Washington, D.C. Mayor Muriel Bowser Thursday. During a press conference, Bowser, a Democrat, admitted there are no alternative options, including virtual learning, for students who cannot attend school due to the district's vaccine mandate, meaning unvaccinated children will effectively be left without an education. Over 40%, listen to this, podcast listeners, over 40% of Blacks ages 12 to 17 are not vaccinated, according to city data. The Daily Signal, asked Muriel Bowser, D.C.'s mayor, what the plan was for unvaccinated students. Washington, D.C. public schools start school on Monday of next week. Bowser responded, they can go to school on Monday, but they need to get their vaccinations, and their families will be alerted as to the dates. Students get 20 days to provide their vaccination certificate. The Office of the State Superintendent of Education for D.C. announced that all students must have an up-to-date immunization certification on file with the school within the first 20 days, or they will not be allowed to attend school or school activities until that immunization certification is secured by the school. The office continued, if the student does not come into compliance within a 20-day period, a 20-school-day period, the school must remove the student until the immunization certification is secured. When pressed on whether or not unvaccinated children would have to use virtual learning for their education if they were not compliant with the vaccine mandate, Bowser said, we're not offering remote learning for children, and families will not need to comply with what is necessary to come to school. Updated data from the government's vaccine numbers website shows 47% of Black children in the district, ages 12 to 15, had not completed their primary vaccination series necessary to go back to school in person. Among Black teens, ages 16 to 17, 42% are unvaccinated. By the way, by unvaccinated, we mean COVID vaccination. We don't mean polio vaccination. We mean COVID. So a Black mayor of Washington, D.C., a Black mayor is literally discriminating against the Black students in Washington, D.C., and telling them, and she's acting as if she's a doctor or a scientist, and telling them what kind of medical care they must have. Medical care, by the way, that is experimental. The COVID vaccine is still experimental, especially for children. My God. And this idiot in Washington, D.C. is saying, get the vaccine or you can't get educated. Even online, you can't get educated. We're not going to provide online education. So I'm just curious, podcast listeners, we're calling this podcast, Biden Says MAGA is Like Fascism, because he did say that in a speech yesterday. But yet in Washington, D.C., right? In Washington, D.C., we have the mayor of Washington who's actually acting like a real fascist by saying, get the health care I tell you to get, including experimental health care, not proven health care, not sanctioned health care, or I'm not going to educate you. I'm not going to allow you to go to school. And by the way, I'm not even going to let the tuition money follow you to an alternative school, like, I don't know, a private school. I'm not going to do any of those things for you. You don't deserve it because you're not listening to the diktats of the DC mayor, Muriel Bowser. So who's the real fascist? I ask you, who's the real fascist? And if that isn't enough, on a funny note about this whole vaccination thing, and to be clear, we were talking about the COVID vaccination, but this guy, Phil Kerpen, tweeted out recently, just a couple days ago, he tweeted out about the monkeypox issue in the U.S. He tweeted out the CDC, the Center for Disease Control, their data show that 99.1% of U.S. monkeypox cases are in men, of whom 99% reported male-to-male sexual contact, which, of course, is the way, as far as I've been reading, that this is actually, monkeypox is actually transmitted from male to male. So Axel Wolf retweeted this tweet by Phil Kerpen. Again, Kerpen's tweet was, CDC data, 99.1% of U.S. monkeypox cases are in men, of whom 99% reported male-to-male sexual contact. Axel Wolf says, the pandemic of the unvaginated. The pandemic of the unvaginated. Those who actually are in the monkeypox cohort. So what's interesting is, ladies and gentlemen, we have a mayor of the nation's capital who's literally engaging in what really is soft fascism, namely telling you that you must get medical care that is unproven and not sanctioned even by the U.S. government, right? By the FDA, because it's all experimental. And what she's saying to the children of Washington, D.C., the predominantly Black children of Washington, D.C., who are not vaccinated, is you must take this experimental medication and we're going to just, I don't know, experiment on you and see what happens. Because I'm the mayor. I get to decide the kind of health care that you receive. I'm sorry, ladies and gentlemen. This is why I have always been against nationalized health care. Because what can't the government force you to do? What medication can't they force you to take? If they can take away your ability to learn, your ability to make a living, then what can't they do? And this is why, of course, we're living in a constitutional republic, because we have idiots like this, absolute idiots like this. And so now to the actual part of the podcast, in which the podcast is titled, Biden Says MAGA is Like Fascism. Yes, so he really did say this. So Joe Biden decided to travel really far outside of Washington, D.C. In other words, he traveled 30 minutes outside of Washington, D.C. to the very liberal state of Maryland, the very blue state of Maryland. And Joe Biden goes to, I think it was Rockville, Maryland, and he made a speech. And now, once again, for all of you out there in podcast land that don't know Maryland, no reason why you would or should. Believe me, you're not missing a lot. In Rockville, Maryland, that is in Montgomery County, Maryland. Montgomery County has an enormous amount of federal employees that live there. Federal employees that live in Montgomery County. And those federal employees who live in that county and the county itself are overwhelmingly not just on the left, but on the far, far left, like as far as you can go. And so in the New York Post, actually, there's an article where Biden slams the Make America Great Again philosophy as, quote, semi-fascism. He says this at a DNC rally. Okay, so there's a rally, and the rally, of course, is sponsored by the Democratic National Committee, and it's being held in Maryland, very blue Maryland. And so Biden, like, Maryland, for those of you who know your U.S. geography, of course, I'm sure Democrats don't, but Maryland is adjacent to Washington, D.C., and certainly in Montgomery County, Maryland, the president could drive in his limousine and he'd be at this particular function within 25 minutes, probably, where the president decides to, of all things, call the American people who believe in Make America Great Again semi-fascists. I'm sorry. So wouldn't you know what my first reaction was, podcast listeners? My first reaction is that Biden must be like a complete and utter tool of the CCP, of the Chinese Communist Party. Because who else would say that Make America Great Again is a philosophy that is semi-fascism? So making your country great again, or great ever, or just great is semi-fascism? America, the great country America, which has saved the world, a number of times in 2 world wars from fascism and from autocracy and from authoritarianism. I mean, that's what our country does. We are a good country, but no, the Democrats think we're just all bad. And you, the American people who believe in making the country great again, you are a semi-fascist. So in the New York Post, President Joe Biden stepped onto the campaign trail Thursday, kicking off a coast-to-coast political tour with a stump speech that painted a sharp contrast between Democrats and MAGA Republicans' semi-fascism philosophy ahead of the midterm elections. We're seeing now, by the way, MAGAs are semi-fascists. So President Biden ordered the FBI through his Justice Department to act as the Stasi and raid with literally the most advanced weapons that you could purchase Donald Trump's residence, a former president's residence. And Donald Trump is a semi-fascist and his followers are semi-fascists. I mean, literally, the modern Democrat Party under Barack Obama, who I personally believe is the most dangerous president in American history, and it's so unfortunate that he's black because he really, in my opinion, is a Marxist before anything else and uses his color as a crutch to hide his true philosophy, political philosophy, which is Marxism. Basically, Obama and Biden always have a tendency to do what Marxists do, which is to say you're the one that is the fascist when in fact they are the ones who are the fascists. In other words, they're accusing you of what they're actually doing. And this is exactly what Marxism does. Well, we know you're hungry. We know there isn't enough food out there. We know there isn't enough baby formula, but it's because of Republicans. Republicans are stopping that. Quote, we're seeing now either the beginning of the death knell of an extreme MAGA agenda, Biden told the crowd at the Democrat National Committee, Build a Better America rally at high school in Rockville, Maryland. Once again, Rockville, Maryland is Montgomery County, Maryland, which has tons of federal employees. So you have all these people on the federal dole who are federal employees, and the vast majority of them in Montgomery County are on the left. And so you got government speaking to government And they're all going, yeah, those fascists who were working really hard in middle America, who actually don't work for the government and actually support themselves in the private sector, they're the problem. The Make America Great Again people. Yeah, they're the semi-fascists. So then Biden says, it's not just Trump, it's almost semi-fascism. He saved some of the most impassioned remarks to rally members of his base, as well as independents and mainstream Republicans, to turn out to the polls in November to fight off extreme Trump supporters. You know, those people who don't think it's a good idea for the FBI Stasi to raid former presidents' homes. Yeah, you know, those normal people that are out there. We're at a serious moment in our nation's history, he said. The MAGA Republicans don't just threaten our personal rights and economic security, they're a threat to our very democracy. They refuse to accept the will of the people. They embrace political violence. So there you go, ladies and gentlemen. If you want to really look at some of the most dangerous language ever used in modern American history, I just read it to you. Some of the most dangerous language ever used by a president of the United States in modern American history, especially at this particular time. Quote, here's what Biden said. We're at a serious moment in our nation's history, he said. The MAGA Republicans don't just threaten our personal rights and economic security. They're a threat to our very democracy. They refuse to accept the will of the people. They embrace political violence. So we have, on the one side, Biden, who is saying that the Republicans and the MAGA Republicans are the ones who are what? Rioting? Who was rioting all throughout 2020? Antifa, the Democrats. The Democrats were rioting. Who has been killing people since the cancel police movement? The Democrats. And who is threatening our economic security through inflation and through out-of-control government spending? The Democrats. Who is threatening our personal rights by trying to take away your constitutional right to own a gun? The Democrats. And so this statement, ladies and gentlemen, this statement by President Biden in Rockville, Maryland, right outside of Washington, D.C., a statement made just yesterday, in my opinion, is one of the most dangerous statements said by a president of the United States, because the president is literally trying to say that half of America is so dangerous that they must be just, canceled, eliminated, stomped out, that they are semi-fascists, that they are dangerous. So why does that matter? It matters because the president of the United States, President Biden, is literally setting the stage, in my opinion, through that statement, a civil war type conflict. And this is the wrong time to do that. When you have a population in your country, and I mean all people, who are so diametrically opposed to one another, do you really think that saying, quote, we're at a serious moment in our nation's history, the MAGA Republicans don't just threaten our personal rights and economic security, they're a threat to our very democracy. They refuse to accept the will of the people. They embrace political violence. When you literally try to say that your opponent is doing what you have been doing for the past couple of years, and that they're dangerous because they're semi-fascists, what you're effectively saying is there is no way that we can agree with one another, that the only possible solution is to wipe people out and to use government to do it through the Stasi FBI, through the 80,000 new agents at the IRS, through government spending that crowds out the private sector and makes you a de facto public employee. because you're so poor you can't help but take the government money. And it just and because now you've been disarmed, of course, which is what the Democrats have been trying to do for generations. And yet they're saying that the Republicans are the ones that are doing that. This is what ignites civil war. This is dangerous. And I actually hope and pray there are people at the FBI that are listening to this podcast. Because you folks at the FBI, if you had half a brain, I'm talking about not the rank and file members, I'm talking about the upper echelon, elite, crooked leadership at the FBI. You folks at the FBI that are at the top, you have to understand something. Statements like this by this president of the United States, which ascribes to the Republican Party the very things the Democrats are in the process of doing, is setting this country up for a civil war. It is so dangerous. And it is not good. We're already in a soft civil war. But this language could ignite an actual hard civil war. And it's dangerous, and any reasonably intelligent Democrat who's elected or not elected, if they have connections to the Biden administration, should highly advise the Biden administration that this is really dangerous language and ought not. You can say what you want to say, right? Freedom of speech. But why would you frame your conversation this way in an election year? Look, when I talk about Democrats, I do believe that the modern Democrat Party doesn't believe in our republic because they don't believe in our Constitution. Okay? I don't think that the Democrats want to amend our Constitution. I think that they want to destroy it and then remake the country in a much more authoritarian kind of one size fits all. You're not going to have 50 unique states. Everybody's going to be the same. You're going to have a federal government, and that's it. One way and one party. Very, very much like the former Soviet Union or like the CCP. I really do believe that about the Democrat Party. But what I'm not doing is trying to overthrow the Constitution of the United States. It's the opposite. I'm trying to restore the Constitution of the United States, and the Democrats are trying to undermine it. One thing I'm not doing is saying that, these people are folks that, should be wiped out. Because when you use the kind of language the president is using, semi-fascism and so forth, what you're saying is it's okay to carpet bomb the middle of the country. Because, pretty much what we did during World War II to Germany, right? Carpet bombed and bombed the heck out of the country to be able to level it so as to remake Germany and make them understand that, fascism is evil and wrong. And this is what is so dangerous about this language, because there are an enormous amount of Republicans and Democrats and independents alike who are in the center of the country that feel as though they have been abandoned by all politicians, by the way, not just by Democrats, but by Republicans as well. And they're looking for answers, and they feel like their government really, truly is not listening. And one of the reasons that they feel like their government isn't listening is not just because of this kind of incendiary language from Joe Biden, but also because they keep seeing these press conferences in Washington, D.C., which are completely contrary to common sense. You'd have to be a complete idiot to believe any of the stuff that they're saying in Washington, D.C. So, for example, a straight-faced Karine Jean-Pierre, she's the White House press secretary, ladies and gentlemen, says that Joe Biden is fiscally responsible and is second to none. So why did she say that? In what context? Well, yesterday there was a White House press briefing, and Karine Jean-Pierre, the White House press secretary, decided to get in front of the press and talk about, with a nice little display on an easel, of how wonderful the student debt relief would be for all of the American people, not just for the rich people that are really going to get it, but for all of the American people. And so she tried to sell that and say, well, it's actually really, really fiscally responsible. I mean, that's what we're doing. So imagine, right? You're watching, you live in middle America, you're a blue collar worker, and you have the president of the United States who calls you first a semi-fascist because you believe in making America great again, because you want to repatriate jobs to the United States, and you want to be free of government and free from government. And then you have the president attacking you, and at the same time, you have the president attacking you a second time by saying, well, I know you didn't go to college. That's too bad. I'm going to give the people that did, who make more than you, $10,000 to reduce their debt. You don't get $10K. Oh, no, you don't get it because you didn't vote for me. You didn't vote for me. I'm going to give just the people that voted for me $10,000 or more than likely voted for me. And I'm going to help all of the constituency that helps me, namely the college professors and the colleges themselves. You're watching this, you're Joe Sixpack in middle America, and you're just saying, these people are not only insulting my intelligence, they're attacking every aspect of my independence from government, which is uniquely American and uniquely important to keeping our country free and keeping our country a republic. So we have this clip from Jean-Pierre. It's about a little less than a minute long. White House Press Secretary Jean-Pierre, who's talking about, giving you $10,000 off of your student debt and how it's really fiscally responsible. We have that clip. Here it is.
About American Federation of Teachers, AFT, you all know them. This administration's decisions have been a game changer. And lastly, Representative Clyburn, this will help free borrowers, especially borrowers of color, from the crushing burden of student loan debt and help make higher education accessible, affordable to all. And to your other part of your question about who we spoke to, we are constantly in conversations on all these types of big issues, big announcement, whether it's legislation, whether it's executive action that we take with Congress, with groups, and people who are really going to be affected by this. That is important to the president. And the way that we see this is a smart, fiscally balanced approach to deal with an issue that does indeed cripple families.
Yeah, so that's Jean-Pierre talking about, of course, how this is fiscally responsible. It's fiscally responsible to spend hundreds of billions of dollars and give it as a rebate to people who borrowed money and then transfer that debt to the rest of the American people. And I know that we talked about this the other day, but what we didn't have was this particular clip from Jean-Pierre. And it demonstrates once again, ladies and gentlemen, how the Democrat Party has truly become the party of Marxism, because they literally are trying to do and say that they are fiscally responsible. They're trying to, in other words, co-opt the Republican Party, who talks about fiscal responsibility and God knows should do a better job at actually being fiscally responsible. But then themselves, the Democrats saying, oh yeah, we're fiscally responsible. We're the ones spending all the money, so that makes us fiscally responsible. Fiscally responsible is, by the way, when you don't spend money. It's when you save money. And you're not saving money by spending it. You're spending it. That's the opposite of fiscally responsible. Why are the Democrats saying this? Why is Jean-Pierre saying this? Well, because in the Daily Caller, Jerome Powell says there is far greater pain and issues a grim prediction on reining in inflation. The Federal Reserve will not stop raising interest rates designed to combat inflation, even if the policy leads to damages in the labor market and pain for everyday Americans, Federal Reserve Chair Jerome Powell said in a Friday morning speech. The Fed chief reiterated the department's commitment to returning inflation to 2% and stressed that price stability was necessary for sustainability. Yeah. So essentially, without reading the entire article, the Fed chair is basically saying that he is going to continue to jack up interest rates, and that's going to affect the labor market, which means companies will slow down hiring or start to cut jobs. And in addition to that, you're not going to be able to borrow money in a home equity line of credit to make improvements to your house or perhaps use that money for other purposes. And you're probably not going to be able to buy a house because interest rates are so high, and that there's going to be a lot of greater pain to come in the future. And so that's the head of the Federal Reserve that is saying that. And that's why you had the Biden administration, through Jean-Pierre, saying that they're fiscally responsible, that everything's fine, the economy's good, don't worry. We're the ones that are fiscally responsible. We're the ones that are helping people and trying to make them have a better life. And so they're always projecting, always. And so, speaking of which, in the Babylon Bee about the $10,000 lobbing off of your student loan debt, the Babylon Bee says, average lifetime earnings of a gender studies grad rise to $10,000. So in other words, you spend all this money in college to become a gender studies grad, and you're making $0, but now you're making $10,000 because the government's going to pay you $10,000 of your debt. That's pretty good. Way to go, Babylon Bee. So next up, podcast listeners, the IRS Tea Party head, that is to say, the IRS individual who was fired after the Tea Party debacle, has been rehired. Yeah, they've actually been rehired. I mean, I can't make this stuff up. So in the Gateway Pundit, IRS official Nicole Flax, who was involved in the IRS conservative targeting scandal, is picked to lead the centralized office for the new 87,000 IRS employees. The IRS Commissioner John Koskinen testified before the House Oversight and Government Reform Committee on March 26, 2014. Koskinen told Representative Jason Chaffetz, Republican of Utah, during the hearing that Lois Lerner's emails were archived, and it would take a long time to retrieve them. For those that don't remember, Lois Lerner was in the IRS at a very high level, and Lois Lerner was the head person in the IRS that kept rejecting Tea Party applicants who were applying for tax-exempt status for their organizations. And that was during the Obama administration. So the Obama administration had already managed to figure out a way of militarizing and weaponizing the IRS. Following John Koskinen's testimony, the IRS told Congress that Lois Lerner's email were lost in a computer crash. The Obama IRS later said it could not find emails from 6 other top employees involved in the conservative targeting scandal. And it makes you wonder, by the way, if the FBI wasn't involved in this too. Why wouldn't the FBI have immediately gotten involved back then during the Obama administration to investigate and or at least figure out what was happening at the IRS? And you can say, well, no, it's the Justice Department. And so, well, of course, the FBI is independent. The Justice Department is definitely not independent of Obama. And it would makes you wonder if the FBI was corrupted even back then at the highest levels I'm talking about. Not the rank and file FBI guys, but the top guys. And I think the answer to that question is probably yes. It's not just Lois Lerner's emails that were lost. The Internal Revenue Service says it can't produce emails from 6 more employees at the IRS involved in targeting conservative groups, according to 2 Republicans investigating the scandal. Now, folks, I'm talking about all of this stuff that happened during the Obama administration with the IRS because what do you think is going to happen when the IRS has 87,000 new employees and $80 billion more in cash to do what? To go after and target those individuals. The IRS recently informed Ways and Means Chairman Dave Camp and Subcommittee Chairman Charles Boustany that the computer crashes resulted in additional lost emails. including Nicole Flax, the chief of staff to former IRS Commissioner Stephen Miller, who was fired in the wake of the targeting scandal. So Nicola Flax was the chief of staff to that commissioner, Stephen Miller. Stephen Miller himself fired at targeting conservative groups. The revelation about Lerner's emails rekindled the targeting scandal, and today's news has further inflamed Republicans. Camp and Boustany are now demanding a special prosecutor to investigate every angle of the events that led to Lois Lerner's revelation in May 2013 that the agency had used inappropriate criteria to review the applications of Tea Party groups for tax exemption. The lawmaker expressed particular outrage that the agency has known since February that it would not be able to produce the emails requested by the committee, yet did not apprise the committee of the fact. And they charged in a statement that the IRS is attempting to cover up the fact that it conveniently lost key documents in the investigation. Remember this stuff? This all happened during the Obama administration. And back then, we all looked at each other and I know we said to one another, what is happening to our country? I mean, they are literally just lying. I lost it. I couldn't find it. Sorry, teacher, I forgot it. I forgot my lunch. The dog ate my homework. I mean, just absurd claims that they made, and they got a pass. Nicole Flax was the chief of staff to former IRS Commissioner Stephen Miller, who was fired for targeting conservative groups. The IRS lost Nicole's emails this week. So now we're talking about currently, ladies and gentlemen. This week, in August 2022, the Biden regime appointed Nicole Flax to lead the IRS's centralized office for the 87,000 new IRS agents. So Nicole worked for the dude that was fired, who was crooked as all get out. And she and that guy, we all know, were working together to target conservative groups, to deny them any tax-exempt status so they couldn't legitimately do what? Raise money. If you can't get tax-exempt status as a political organization, it's pretty damn hard to organize and raise money. You can't really collect money. It would be considered income to that organization versus a donation. So people were less likely to give. And it just slowed things down, and it helped Obama get reelected. But the same person, Nicole Flax, has come back. So once again, it shows you who is running this country. It's not Joe Biden. It's Barack Obama. Because all of these crooked people in the IRS, they all got off. No one's in jail from the Tea Party scandals at the IRS. And instead, they brought one of these hacks back, Nicole Flax, who's now going to run and be in charge of the centralized office, which does what? I'm sure largely decides who they're going to target for audits. Nicole is the perfect pick for the government to target and destroy any conservative voter in America, as it says here in Gateway Pundit. And there are a bunch of different tweets and so forth that are there. Ladies and gentlemen, this is some dangerous, dangerous stuff. And I will go back to what I said earlier about Joe Biden. When Joe Biden said that Making America Great Again is a semi-fascist organization, inferring that if you believe in making America great again, that you are a semi-fascist, and yet we are putting a semi-fascist back in charge of the IRS because your taxes are no longer about what the law is, and getting tax-exempt status is no longer about what the law is. No, it's about who you know and what your political party affiliation is, and whether or not they decide to go after you based on that political party affiliation. And it's just a remarkable, remarkable thing that we have an $80 billion expansion at the IRS with 87,000 new agents. And we have one of the top people that was appointed, an individual who's crooked, who was part of that Tea Party shakedown in the IRS that Obama was responsible for. And again, the takeaway here is it's proof that Barack Obama and his acolytes are running the United States of America, not Joe Biden. And this is proof to all of you who always believed and were disappointed that the first black president of the United States was really not a uniter. He was really a Marxist. He's really not a gentleman that believes in the Republic. He doesn't believe in the Constitution and the Bill of Rights. It was always about making America less great. It was always about making America more like the CCP, more like the former Soviet Union, more like an authoritarian government. And he's still in charge. He's literally serving his third term, Barack Obama is, which of course is unconstitutional. He's just not sitting in the White House. And I don't ever remember this happening before, certainly in my lifetime, when you have a former president who's really the de facto president and is doing so in a third term, even though that's in violation of the United States Constitution. You can't serve 3 terms. And so, speaking of the IRS, this is kind of an interesting human interest story. Do you know that the $1.34 billion Mega Millions winner still hasn't claimed their prize? So I don't know if you guys know this, but the Mega Millions, it's a lottery that goes across many different states, and they pool the money together that's collected when you buy a $1 lottery ticket or however much it costs. I'm not really sure. Well, a month ago, the jackpot was $1.34 billion, and one person won it. And that person, 30 days later, still has not come forward. Now imagine that. So no one knows if the person, obviously someone has that ticket because someone bought the ticket. The lottery agencies know only one person won because obviously then they know the numbers that were issued and they know the numbers that were drawn. But that person hasn't come forward. I wonder how much the IRS is going to shake them down for, by the way. The massive jackpot marked the largest lottery prize ever won. And the winner happened to be in Illinois. And the third largest lottery prize ever won in the United States. So it was bought at a speedway, which appears to be in DePlain, Illinois. DePlain, Illinois, a speedway. So if you're out there in podcast land and you bought a lottery ticket in DePlain, Illinois, at a speedway gas station, you might be sitting on a $1.3 billion lottery ticket. I sure hope you know that. And if you're listening and you happen to buy that ticket, you might want to run for the hills real quickly and not tell anybody that you know, and, maybe hire a few security guards around you while you try to go turn the ticket in and claim your prize. For a prize of this magnitude, it's not unusual for the winner to take a while to claim it, says Illinois Lottery Director Harold Mays, a week after the drawing. I find that hard to believe, by the way. I'm sure they're going through a range of emotions. Illinois Mega Millions players that take home jackpots over $250K have the option to stay anonymous. But the winner might not even know that they hold the jaw-dropping ticket. Yeah, that's probably more like it. The winner can wait a full year to claim their money. But by the way, why would they? But they only have 60 days from the date of the draw to decide if they want to be paid $1.34 billion over 29 years or receive the modest sum of $780 million in cash. Can you imagine? Can you imagine? $780 million in cash. I know that's the cash option. I don't know if you have to pay taxes on top of that. I just don't know. But still, Speedway DePlains, the retailer who sold the winning ticket last month, is also entitled to a cash bonus since they sold that winning ticket of $500,000. Nothing makes us happier than bringing a little bit of joy to our customers' lives, or in this case, a whole lot of joy, says Michael Browning, regional director for Speedway, in a statement. Yeah, you think? get $500,000 for just selling a piece of paper. The workers at the gas station are staying tight-lipped about who they think the winner could be. So that's interesting. So it's possible that they know who the winner is, the people that work at the gas station, but they just don't want to tell anyone. I mean, have they actually told the guy that holds the ticket? I mean, it wouldn't be a bad idea. And so I thought you guys would be interested in this story just because we're talking about the IRS, and I'm sure the IRS is probably already trying to figure out who this person is, and if it's a conservative, how they can shake them down and try to take the ticket away from them. Okie Ray comments on this story. Whatever they do, they need to do it before tax increases and an 87,000 stronger IRS demand the winner pay $800 million in taxes. Way to go, Okie Ray, because that's the first thing that came to my mind, too. And there were a couple of replies to him. It says, or he can now shoot you for resisting payment. Yeah, or the IRS can shoot you for resisting payment. And then another one, Mickey Fiston Undefined. Okay. I just drove by that gas station last weekend. I felt nothing other than sad that one of my favorite pizza places a block away still hasn't reopened after closing because of COVID. Well, that was, weird. Happy-go-lucky. Smart winner. Get a great attorney set up, an untraceable LLC, and hide your identity at all costs. The family and friends will come out like rats on a sinking ship if the winner is identified. Can you imagine? Can you imagine, like, if you told someone, Chris, our podcast producer on the other side of the camera, Chris, if you won that $780 million and you just told one person, how likely is it that that one person that you told isn't going to tell at least one other person?
Oh my gosh.
You know?
Of course.
Because they're going to be so excited. The first thing they're going to do is pick up the phone and talk to their brother or sister or cousin or best friend and say, hey, I'm not supposed to tell you because I'm the only person that knows other than Chris. But he just won $780 million. And then that person, before you know it, everybody knows. I mean, so if you had the winning ticket, let's face it, you're going to be that person. I think the smart thing to do would be to tell no one. And that is a great burden to carry, right? You win $780 million, you really can't tell a soul because I just don't think that anyone outside of yourself is capable of keeping such an incredibly important story secret. And when they don't keep it secret, you're not going to have people knocking at your door, but you're going to have people potentially trying to take what you have. And that's really the scary and dangerous thing. But I just thought it was interesting that one of the individuals who commented on this story, which is why I brought it up, that no one has actually claimed this $1.34 billion lottery ticket. I just thought it was really funny that one of the commenters, their first comment was, yeah, well, the IRS is going to come for you at $800 million. Why wouldn't they? Because the federal government is spending so much money. They're so desperate for needing money, the Democrats are, to keep spending, that at some point they're going to take everything you have. And that is what so many mega conservatives, Joe Biden and FBI leadership think, right? That when you arm the FBI agents and you expand it by 87,000 agents and you give them $80 billion to shake down the American people, your first thought process is, well, gee, those are the same people that are trying to take away my guns. And now they want to take away my money because they're overspending themselves. It's kind of like that relative that keeps borrowing and borrowing and borrowing and borrowing and borrowing. And before you know it, you just say to yourself, this guy is never going to stop. He's going to lose everything. Then he's going to come after me. That's the government. They're never going to stop under the Democrat leadership. And to be fair, the Republicans spend way too much at the federal level too, because they do. And they're not going to stop until such time as the government becomes so incredibly desperate that it starts coming after your stuff. Thus, the reason that so many mega conservatives and non-mega conservatives alike, the truly fiscally responsible people in our country, you know, the people that go out every day and work for a living and really try to make a life for themselves, are really worried about their government. They're worried about how powerful the government's trying to make itself and what they could potentially do to the life that you have made for yourself. Makes makes perfect sense to me. Perfect sense. So next up, podcast listeners, there is a school board revolt in Florida. You heard that correctly. There is a school board revolt that occurred in Florida. It's really kind of fascinating because Florida, like some states in the country, I don't know how many, be interesting to know, has a system whereby school board candidates don't have an R or a D after their name. In Florida, they're just running for the school board on a county by county basis, on a school system by school system basis, and it just has their name, does not have a party affiliation. That's not permitted. So as a result, the Democrats in Florida have done what? They have taken over many of the school boards, including in really red counties, because Republicans have a tendency of being very supportive of education, as they should be, but also very trusting of the people that run for school board. Whereas the Democrats have had this long game where they have been inserting the woke, crazy nut jobs on the school boards. So DeSantis decided that he was going to support 30 school board members who are running in counties and jurisdictions across Florida. And 25 won. 25 won. Why? Because DeSantis told everybody, these are the Republicans. Right? The Republicans are finally in charge in the state of Florida. They finally have more Republicans in Florida than they have Democrats. There's no reason in Republican counties in Florida, which is the majority of the counties, there should be a single Democrat, as far as I'm concerned, unless they are an open-minded, critical thinker on the school boards. And I want to clarify what I mean by that. Okay? A critical thinker is someone who's there because they really want the children to learn about the most important subjects in K to 12. Critical thinker is not the person who tells you that you should have tampons in boys' bathrooms in K to 12, which, by the way, they did in the state of Maryland, for those that you don't know. And other blue states have done this too. I'll say this again. School boards in Maryland, in the blue counties in Maryland, and the state legislature got together, and the teachers union looked the other way and said nothing, and they passed a bill to require that tampons be put in boys' bathrooms in public schools for children in Maryland. This is why getting control of your school board is so important, because education is not about that kind of utter nonsense and getting involved in the children's personal sexual lives. It's just sick, as we've talked about ad nauseum on this podcast. But 25 of the 30 school board members endorsed by Governor DeSantis won or advanced in their races, campaigning on parental rights, transparency, school choice, and safety. GOP-backed candidates won 3 elections in Sarasota County, creating a new 4-1 majority. They also scored 2 big gains in Miami-Dade, which is a big deal, by the way, which now becomes the largest U.S. school district with a conservative majority. Both school boards last year voted to mandate that students keep wearing masks, defying parents in the Florida law. So in other words, you had a couple of school boards in Florida which voted to keep masks on children, including today in public schools in Florida, because they're back in public school in Florida. And so fortunately, those school boards have now flipped to Republican. And what are the Republicans saying? If you want to wear a mask, of course you can. But mandating it? No. Just like mandating a child have a vaccine that's an experimental vaccine. The wins are a coup for Mr. DeSantis, who is turning parental control and educational choice into a GOP advantage. The elections are political vindication for his parental bill of rights that became law this spring, that was widely criticized in the national press. DeSantis put these ideas to the voters' test on Tuesday, working with Republicans and the 1776 Project PAC to raise money for reform candidates and turning the school elections into the most competitive in memory. It just shows you, if Republicans know who the Republicans are, who are running for school board, then they will win. And the Democrats have realized that in school board races, that it is their advantage to not tell people their party affiliation. Can you imagine? And there is never a greater time in American history when we need to know what people's party affiliation is than now when you're running for school board, that is. Because we know, and I will tell you this, every Democrat I have met as it relates to public education that wants to run for a school board, they want to run with they want to govern and run with a very woke agenda. They have an agenda that is truly, truly not related to public education whatsoever. And it just makes you wonder, who are these people? Why, what motivates them? And so good for you, Governor DeSantis, because you have decided to go down ballot to some of the most important races, the races that actually set policy-making jobs at the public school level, and to get Republicans into those seats and to oust the Democrats in Florida who still think they're in control and clearly aren't. Next up, podcast listeners, we have the dumbest bill in America. And do we have a lead up, Mr. Producer? Here it is. And it's the dumbest bill in America, and it is California bans gas cars. Not going to ban, bans gas cars. California regulators approve banning new gas car sales. In the Daily Wire, and you've also seen it on the news programs, and you've seen it, by the way, on all of them, the left and right news programs. Left, of course, MSNBC, CNN, think it's a great idea. California regulators have approved a plan to ban the sale of new gasoline-powered vehicles by 2035 in a Thursday vote. So here's my first question before even going on in the article, Chris. You have a gas-powered vehicle. You live in Texas. You drive a lot in Texas because there are vast open areas. You would like to go to California with your SUV and take your dog and your family on a vacation. Why to California? I have no idea, but that's what you want to do. So you go there to California in your SUV and you get there. Where do you buy gas for your vehicle? Where do you buy gasoline? So obviously, if you have a gasoline station in California, or you have a gasoline station chain in California, you're certainly not going to open up any more gasoline stations. In fact, you're going to start converting what you already have to electric EV stations. So you might have a convenience store and a gas station. We see them all over the country, but you're going to get rid of the gas. Why wouldn't you? Because California is saying we're not going to allow any more, cars that operate off of gas to be sold in California anymore. So therefore, everybody in California will own an EV. But why would then anyone, and here's the question, why would anyone travel to California in their gasoline-powered car if you can't buy gasoline? Or you have to worry about even finding a place to buy it. Maybe there are places that will still sell gasoline. There probably will be. But how will you know where they are? I mean, one could have just closed. It might be on Google Maps. Hey, here's where you can buy gasoline in California. And then that place just closes. The California Air Resource Board's CARB rules will go into effect at incremental levels in 2026 before building to a 100% ban of new car gas sales in 2035. The state's move will likely affect the rest of the country since it sits as the largest automaker in the U.S. What? Oh, okay, I guess what they mean is more people in California buy cars because it's such a large population than anywhere in the U.S., and then since everybody in California who buys a car will then from 2035 forward have to buy just EVs and no gasoline powered cars, then the rest of the U.S. is going to have to just bend over and take it? Quote, "This is monumental," CARB member Daniel Sperling told CNN. "This is the most important thing the CARB has done in the last 30 years. It's important not just for California, it's important for the country and for the world." The ban, which becomes one of the first of its kind in the world, was proposed by the California Air Resources Board, otherwise known as CARB, in April to achieve Democrat Governor Gavin Newsom's goal of reducing emissions by eliminating the sale of new gas cars by 2035. Once again, Governor Newsom, he wants to decide what kind of medicine you must take. He wants to decide whether you can go on a beach and whether you have to wear a mask when you're on a beach during the pandemic. Governor Newsom wants to decide and tell you that you can't have your Second Amendment rights. And Governor Newsom wants to decide what you can and can't eat. And now Governor Newsom wants to decide what kind of vehicle you must drive. California's plan to eliminate the sale of gas-powered vehicles by the middle of the next decade also carries with it benchmarks to hit along the way. Under the plan, California requires 35% of new vehicles sold to produce zero emissions by 2026. So more than a third of vehicles sold in just a couple of years must be non-gasoline-powered cars, jumping to 68% by 2030, and then finally hitting 100% of cars in 2035. Used cars would not be affected by the plan. So I'm just curious, Chris, how's that going to work? So let's say in California, you've got 45 million people, and there are 35 million used cars that will be in existence in 2035. Well, then what? I mean, where will you get gas? Wouldn't gasoline go up in price? And that's the whole point of this. What'd you say?
I feel like people who sell gas are just going to leave the state. They're not even going to try and switch over to electric infrastructure. They just leave.
Yeah, I think that's what's going to happen too, because any strong economy gives the people that live in that economy, especially in a free society, by the way, but a strong economy in a free society basically says you decide what you want to buy. You decide what technology you want to adopt and purchase. And then, let the market win. And it's funny? People are very rational. They will always buy that product that is the best product and also the cheapest product at the same time. They want to get the most that they can possibly get for the money that they're spending. That's how a rational consumer acts. But the government in California no longer trusts consumers. They no longer could trust the free market. This is the way. This is the way, which is just like the 5-year plan in the CCP and the 5-year plan in the former Soviet Union. This is the way. There's no deviating from this plan. There's no freedom of choice. This is exactly who the Democrats are, certainly in California above anywhere else. Experts looked at the ban to accelerate the transition to electric vehicles, a desire expressed by President Joe Biden in an executive order last year that encouraged the government to push for half of all vehicles sold in the U.S., that is, by 2030, to be electric. So, folks, if you really wonder what the modern Democrat Party thinks about you, they think that you're too stupid to make the choices that are best for you and your family. And therefore, they must constantly engage in one diktat after another to tell you how you should live every aspect of your lives. And as you've heard me say many times, climate change is about control of every aspect of your life. And that is exactly what they're doing in California. And that's the dumbest bill in America. California bans gas cars. And that's it for Mark and the Millennials. Thank you for joining Mark and the Millennials. This is Mark Fisher. Thank you to our producer, Christopher Hopkins. Check us out on iTunes, Spotify, YouTube, Facebook, Twitter, Getter, True Social, Rumble, and our website. See you next time.